Good evening, and thank you for joining tonight's telephone town hall meeting hosted by Douglas County, Broadband in a Changing World. My name is Roger, your moderator tonight as we talk about broadband in Douglas County. We are here tonight live and looking forward to hearing your thoughts and answering your questions during this community conversation. Before we begin, I would like to take just a moment to tell you about a new format we are debuting tonight. We will spend the first 40 minutes of the town hall talking about the community broadband study the county is currently undertaking. Following the broadband discussion, we will open the floor for any question you have with your Douglas County Commissioners, Abe Laden, Laura Thomas, and George Teal. They are all live and looking forward to hearing from you. We want this to be very interactive, so if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad, and you will be transferred to an operator who will take down some basic information. Once the operator notes your information, you'll be returned to the call and can listen to the conversation until it's your turn. So press star 3 on your keypad to ask a question. We will limit all callers to just one question. When it's your turn, I'll call your name and ask you to repeat your question for our live audience. We'll also be asking a few polling questions during the call, and I'll explain that process to you later. We know everyone has a lot of questions, and we'll get to those very soon, but first, I would like to ask each commissioner to make some opening remarks. Commissioner Laden, please get us started.
Roger, thank you for that, and I'd like to welcome everybody here in our audience and everybody online. This is definitely a new format for us. This is our 31st live town hall, and normally we're used to thousands of folks online over Zoom, so it's a lot of fun to not only have many people online, but physical, warm bodies with us this evening. You know, we're talking about broadband because it's really the fourth utility. We're aware that for many folks that are in Douglas County, they may be served by broadband, but they are generally underserved. So they're not unserved, they just are underserved when it comes to reliability of that fourth utility. For us as a board, it's critically important that high-speed internet is delivered in Douglas County in partnership with all those stakeholders and folks that are involved in high-speed internet, primarily because it's also a traffic solution. We want to make sure that people don't necessarily need to travel to a big box in the tech center in order to get work done. They can be at home in Sedalia and parts of our rural Douglas County, getting work done from home in a high-speed, normal, reliable capacity, just like folks throughout the Front Range. So we're really excited to engage in this conversation with you, both in person and online. And we've got some wonderful experts here tonight to share with us.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody here in the room and everybody online who's listening in. This is an important conversation, and we'll be focusing on answering your questions about broadband and internet access needs here in Douglas County. We're going to talk about broadband and internet for about 40 minutes, and then the last few minutes of this call will be an open forum. So those of you who stay on, you can ask us any question you'd like. So thank you for being a part of this evening. Commissioner Teal.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. George Teal here. Thank you for everyone who joined us, made the trip down here to Castle Rock to join us here in the room. And thanks to everybody who's joining us online or maybe even just on your phone. Again, a very important conversation that we're hoping to have here with all of you today. Those of you who watch the news, you know that there's a new infrastructure bill that has made its way through Congress. And part of that is federal funding for broadband opportunities here in counties just like Douglas County. I was speaking to Arena here, our colleague, our expert from HR Green just a few moments, and she was talking about, well, you know, what's the issue? Obviously, we are a rural county in terms of land area. We know that rural broadband is a challenge for many of the folks who live here in the county. And do we think it's a good thing? Of course we think it's a good thing. Of course we're interested in making sure that, especially given the last year and a half we've had with COVID and how many people have been really forced to do business from their homes and just stay connected with friends and family, the importance of broadband in our lives has really risen to the top. But when we talk about what that role of the federal funds that are coming in, the state funds that are coming in, and how the county should spend some of those funds here locally. That's a big question, and we're hoping that you guys can help us shape some of those answers, maybe give us some of those answers this evening. So before I pass it back to Roger, just want to remind everybody, if you're on your phones, press *3 to ask a question. Roger, back to you.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Now let's hear from Irina Stevens, who is a management analyst of fiber and broadband services at HR Green. She will be sharing some information about the community broadband study the county is currently undertaking. Also joining and answering your questions with Irina is Ed Barrett of HR Green. They're both looking forward to taking your questions, and as you've heard, press *3 to get in the queue. Irina, go ahead.
Thank you, Roger, and thank you everyone for inviting us here today to talk about broadband in your community, and everyone who has joined in person and on the phone. Broadband's an issue that is affecting a lot of communities in Colorado, especially rural communities, and a lot of communities are trying to figure out what potential actions they can take to, improve connectivity, especially in light of, what's been happening in the last couple of years. I'll briefly talk about our survey that we've launched, that's been launched for the last month or so. We still have it live. I encourage you guys to take it until it closes on Friday, and I'll share some preliminary findings we have from that. I am Irina Stevens at HR Green. I have about 11 years of experience in the broadband industry, and our fiber and broadband group leaders, Ed Barrett, and he can take a minute to introduce himself on the phone right now.
All right, Ed, go ahead. All right, well, we'll come back to Ed in a minute. Ed may be muted. Check your phone. And I will let you know what the web address is if you'd like to access the survey if you've not had a chance to take it. It's douglas.co.us/broadband-internet-access. I'll check back to see it. Ed, are you there? All right. Well, as a reminder, if you'd like to ask our panel a question, please press *3 on your keypad to get in the queue. And if you'd like to participate online, you can do so by visiting douglas.co.us/town hall. And also, as a reminder, we've got a new format tonight. So the first 40 minutes is broadband. We'll be taking your questions and comments about the broadband study. And then the last 20 minutes is an open forum with your commissioners. So before we get to questions, I'm going to ask Commissioner Laden to ask our first polling question tonight. Commissioner?
Thank you, Roger. So here's the question. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being low and 5 being high, how good was your home broadband connection in meeting your needs before the pandemic affected you and your family?
All right, it's easy to participate. All you have to do is press the number on your phone or click the answer if you're joining online to enter the response. As you're recording your vote, I'll share the results in just a few minutes. Let's get the conversation going by taking our first question. And we do have an online question from William. And Commissioner Laden, do you want to read that for us?
Sure. So our first question from William online is, I pay a lot for my broadband, but my service is horrible. Will this help fix it?
I think the issue of affordability is really on par with the issue of access and availability for a lot of people. In the last year, there has been some federal efforts to offset the cost of some broadband options. Currently, we have a $50 subsidy per month that's available to consumers to apply for. And then in the long term, it's going to continue to be an option with $30 a month. This is actually a very underutilized program in Colorado. Not many people know about it, but it is there. And the way that this type of program not only helps individuals afford options for broadband, it also helps companies expand broadband as more people are able to sign up. And it indirectly helps both types of social issues. In our survey, we try to also get to the root of some of these questions. You know, what are the bigger problems? And if you have issues with affordability versus availability. And really part of the study and the goal of the county is to enable increased competition that in effect improves technology and lowers prices.
All right, let's go to a question on the phone from Robin. Robin, go ahead.
Hi there. I live in Douglas County. I have been here since 1998. We currently live at the intersection of Main Street and Newland Gulch in Parker, just before it goes into, just opened for Douglas County before it becomes Lone Tree again. And we have no antenna in this area, so I have to keep a landline, which I'm on right now, and my cell phones. We lost a daughter almost 5 years ago. And had I not picked up the house phone that was right next to me, we would have been disconnected because she had collapsed on the floor after the hospital sent her home and said she was fine, and she wasn't. And I had to get on. Thank God I had a house phone. And we would love to get rid of our house phone, but we can't. And if you go west on where it stops being Main Street and becomes Ridgegate, which is unincorporated Douglas County before it becomes Lone Tree, you find that there is not a single or any build for it of another antenna. So that's why we're all saying we lose our calls all the time.
All right, thank you. Who'd like to address that?
Well, ma'am, maybe before we have an expert respond, just on behalf of Douglas County, I just want to extend our condolences for the loss of your daughter. I think it really underscores the critical importance of high-speed internet and this utility in ensuring that you have the communications that you need. Thank you for sharing that personal story with us.
Yeah, that's a tough issue. And in fact, the number one reason people continue to keep their landline phones is because of the access to emergency response services. So because there's a registration, they know exactly where you're located, they know your address, they can respond quickly. You know, cellular technologies come a long way in being able to triangulate your position for emergency response, but it's not necessarily uniformly accessible and reliable in all places. And in a way, having a higher speed broadband would help not only mitigate the issue of having the emergency response get there faster, but also have the actionable information about any potential emergency response resources available in the area as well.
All right, let's go next to Steve on the phone. Steve, go ahead. Steve, go ahead. You're live on the phone.
Oh, I didn't hear that up front. Sorry. I guess it's not just one focused question, but things that are coming out of this conversation already, and no offense to the lady you brought in there, but she really didn't answer the question. And the question was, will this make my service better? And I think the thing that we have to realize is that we're not talking about one company that's going to have a monopoly, at least I don't think we are, in facilitating this infrastructure that we monolithically call broadband. This is still going to be a capitalistic buyer's market out there. There's going to be many number of players. The other thing I think that popped out in my head is that, yeah, we would all love a Corvette, I'm assuming, but we all can't afford a Corvette, and we all don't need a Corvette. And I think a narrative that has been coming up, and no offense to Robin that called in, but why is this narrative that landlines are obsolete? Robin has a landline. She has access to calling the Douglas County Sheriff or calling the fire department. It's the other thing I'll point out is that we have taxes on our telco bills. I look at the bill every month and I see that there's money set aside, and I understand that this is a tax program and we're trying to tie this into the infrastructure bill. And yeah, the money may be there and it's there to use. And if we don't use it, we may lose it, or somebody else may take our piece of the pie. But there already is money set aside every month that we pay our bill, whether it's a cell phone bill or a landline, for infrastructure development. And maybe that's the job of the county commissioners, and I'm not telling you how to do your job, and I'm really pleased with the job you have been doing, especially in light of Tri-County Health and a whole bunch of other issues. But there is probably money already available outside of the infrastructure bill that has already been set aside for these exact issues. And finally, I'll say, yeah, there are people that live in Valley Park and out in Deckers that choose to live out there. And I would like to know, out of a county of 330,000 people, how many people are actually access deficient? Thank you for your time.
Steve, this is Abe. I think that's a really good question with a lot of important considerations. I think from a county commissioner standpoint, we are not looking to be a utility provider. And I think you're right that we're certainly being sent funds from the federal government. And when we talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, that's $68.2 million. And broadband is no doubt considered a carve-out or a portion of that potential funding opportunity. So I think you raise a good point. I'm often told that most of our county is served by high-speed internet. They're just underserved. So it's not a question of whether they have it or not. It's just not as reliable and as efficient. So,
Keith, this is Commissioner Thomas. I would just like to respond to something that you said, that my hope in hiring H.R. Green as a consultant is to let us know where in the county there would be opportunities that perhaps the commissioners could use the ARPA funds to increase a backbone so that people could then pay whatever was necessary to hook onto that backbone that is put into their neighborhood. We do know that there's a neighborhood here just south of Castle Rock called Keene Ranch, where all of those homeowners came together, worked with a contractor, and paid $4,500 to get high-speed internet to their phone or to their residence. And we have one of those residents here in the room, Mr. Pete Smith. Pete, would you like to talk a little bit about how your neighborhood came together and solved the problem for themselves?
Sure. Our development is off of Toma Road, about 10 miles southwest of Castle Rock. We are a larger acreage, probably average of 8 acres. We've been looking for better solutions for some time. We had Central Acres out there with DSL, but due to the design of their network, many of the people in the community were not able to get reasonable service. So we contacted several different companies and finally found a company known as Thrive Broadband. And we polled all the people in the neighborhood. There's 246 owners in the neighborhood. We polled them and got 2/3 of them agreeable to spend up to $4,500 for bringing in fiber to the home, which is the best technology available for internet today. As background, I'm an engineer and worked in the cable television business for a number of years and built a lot of networks, so have some expertise in the area. In any case, we started last year in October building the network. We just finished about a month ago. 98% of the people in the neighborhood are now signed up for that service. It's competitive in terms of price. We can buy service anywhere from 50 megabits up to 2 gigabits per second symmetrical service. That means it's both ways are high speed. So people in the neighborhood are thrilled to death. And but we contributed to that with about $400 of that $4,500 is going to come back to the residences because we had some funds set aside in case we had legal challenges or anything like that. But so about 400 of that is going to go back to those folks. So the net cost to the residents will be about $4,100.
I'm really glad we were able to pass the mic over to Mr. Smith, because this is something that he and I have talked about in the past, and it's actually something that I went through myself in my own neighborhood not quite 10 years ago. And for me, I was running my own business out of my home at the time. I was not yet a county commissioner, and it was a financial decision that I felt was appropriate for me. My neighbors made the same kind of decision, and so that's one of the reasons. Despite my words for introduction, one of the things I have struggled with is this idea that this should be a government utility, a utility provided by the government. And so I'm kind of looking at this opportunity to see where we can close the gaps, see where we can provide help for residents like the folks in Keene Ranch, like my own neighbors when we went from good internet service to really good, of helping ease those costs as opposed to actually providing a full solution.
All right.
Again, I could add a little bit to this too, because I've been having conversations with the county, and I'll tell you kind of where I come down on it. I don't think the county should own any infrastructure. That has not turned out well. If you look across the nation, to municipalities owning infrastructure and providing it to their residents, generally hasn't turned out to be a good idea. Either the infrastructure goes wanting for lack of support, or prices get out of hand. This is for private enterprise to do it. Most of the county of Douglas County, I've lived here for 42 years now, so most of the county is served by is higher density area. In terms of residences, most of the residences live in higher density areas: Highlands Ranch, Parker, Castle Rock, Lone Tree, that kind of thing. So those are served mostly by Comcast right now, so they have access to high-speed internet. But we have a lot of places, such as Keene Ranch where I live, where kind of left out in the cold there a little bit. And there's a lot of those kind of places around. So there's an opportunity here to take federal funds, combine them perhaps with funds from the homeowners, that what they might be willing to spend, and provide better internet service for a wide variety of people around. There are several wireless carriers in the neighborhood, a couple of fiber-only carriers, and then there's Comcast and CenturyLink as well. So that's kind of what we know about what's out there right now. And I think if we leverage funds properly, we can get a lot done here. I'll raise this as a question for the commissioners, but yesterday an infrastructure bill passed. That bill had $65 billion in it for broadband alone. If I do the math, it turns out Douglas County is almost precisely 0.1% of the population in the nation. So if we got our fair share of that, that says we'd get $65 million just for broadband in the county. That's a huge amount of money. A lot of stuff can be done with that. I don't even know that we need that amount of money. But that's what's in that bill. Now, how much is raked off coming down through the federal bureaucracy and the state bureaucracy and gets to here, that remains to be seen, I guess. But it looks like there's going to be a lot of money available.
Thank you, Pete. Roger?
All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's just a quick reminder for those of you who did join late. We have about 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes left to discuss broadband in a changing world. We want to hear from as many of you as possible. So we're going to move on to questions, some more questions. And next is online from Sylvie, kind of similar to what we've been talking about. Commissioner Thomas, do you want to read that question?
I will. Thank you, Roger. For those of us who live in a very rural area and it's hard to get service, how can we extend broadband here?
Irina.
Thank you. I just want to briefly address the previous caller's question about the line item on his phone bill. That money is a federally run program by the FCC, the Connect America Fund. It does provide grants, but a lot of those grants are small compared to the new infrastructure builds, small enough that they don't provide for the development and investment in new technologies. It's also based on fairly generalized data that the FCC collects from providers, and in many areas, it does not accurately reflect the state of actual internet access within certain neighborhoods. And that's why the survey that we've launched is so important, because it allows the community to provide to the FCC for those grants and for the new federal grants accurate data about where the gaps actually are located, and to be able to invest in new technology that has the capacity for more modern uses and more modern applications. As far as in the rural areas, I think there's a lot of options for rural areas to potentially become connected, especially with the new federal money. That's why, one of the main things that you can do is just make sure that you and your neighbors are taking the survey and providing us that information so that we know where there are specific connectivity problems. These results will be very helpful to know where to target and, kind of takes the steps for working towards solutions.
All right.
Hey, Roger, this is Abe. I'm wondering, you're probably going to provide us those poll results, right?
I am. Next up. Here they are, the results of our first survey question, and we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being low and 5 high, how good was your home broadband connection in meeting your needs before the pandemic affected you and your family? The results were 31% said somewhat high, 23% said low, 20% each said neutral and high. So pretty split results there. Let's go back to Irina to provide a little bit more information on providers and some of the information that she started to talk about. Irina, go ahead.
Yeah, could we fast forward to slide 2?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. So in this slide, we have some preliminary results from the survey, the community survey that we've already collected, about 800 responses from residents and a couple dozen from businesses. And what we found is that people place a lot of importance on the way that they can use the internet for things like education for their kids, telehealth, which is an application that the state of Colorado has increasingly relied on in the last year and a half. They've dedicated a lot more resources to telehealth than in-person clinics. And, quality of life issues, economic development. Douglas County community thinks those are very important values that providers offer with high-speed broadband, and to a large extent, a lot of people think it's okay, and it very widely varies depending on where in the county you are. Approximately a third of the respondents don't think that providers are meeting these needs very well, and this really reflects a lot similarly to what we're seeing in other Colorado towns. We're seeing that, it's possible that the large providers in urban areas are satisfying resident needs, but not in the more rural areas.
All right. Let's pause now and ask our second polling question. Commissioner Thomas, would you please read that question for us?
I will. Thank you, Roger. So here's question number 2. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is the worst and 5 is the best, how well has your internet connection kept up with your needs during the pandemic? This includes working from home, telehealth, and remote education. Remember, 1 is the worst and 5 is the best. Thank you.
All right, please record your vote now. I'll share the results in just a moment. While you're voting, we're going to go back to questions. We're going to start with one that was submitted online from Jennifer. Commissioner Teal, would you like to read her question?
Yeah, you bet, Roger. From Jennifer was, how can our neighborhoods come together on attracting more providers? I thought we heard some interesting ideas from Mr. Smith, but Irina, what can you tell us about that?
On a neighborhood level, we do encourage you to take the survey. And also part of our next steps of the study is that we're going to be talking to different anchor institutions and stakeholder communities, including HOAs. So if you're in an organized area, you want to contact your HOA leadership, that's how you can make your voice heard for this study and give us more accurate results for the next steps forward. For being able to attract providers, that will go a long way in being able to give us the information to know which providers have already invested in your area and which providers may have an interest as we're continuing with the study as we're talking to providers in trying to figure out whether they would be interested in expanding their networks and the best ways where we can allocate some of these grant dollars in the most needful areas.
All right. Let's go next to an online question from Steve. Steve asks, given that a large amount of our utility wires are buried, how can it be financially possible to upgrade wired-based broadband, for example, fiber?
And some of this really comes down to a lot of policy options that you can implement. So one of the most common ways is to implement, a joint dig, joint use, dig once, trenching policy. So as you are engaging in other transportation or road projects, you save scalable costs by only digging the ground once. Digging the ground is the largest cost of installing infrastructure. And so some of these policies can really help facilitate cost-effective expansions of networks for a lot of providers. And in other ways, there's other types of co-location policies you can adopt. There's shared agreements you can have through contractual means with providers. So, for example, one is open access. When you're contributing funding to a provider to expand their network and provide last mile service to your community, you can request that part of those lines are kept open for open access for other providers to also be able to use, so they can expand service to other communities. So those are just a couple of options in the way that you can combine and contribute to cost savings. And a lot of this is made possible by having the ability to partner with private providers and help offset some of the costs that they face in being able to expand their service to underserved communities.
All right, thank you. Here are the results of our second polling question. Again, we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 as the best, how well is your internet connection kept up with your needs during the pandemic? That includes work from home, telehealth, and remote education. 35% said 5, very good. 24% said 4, somewhat good. And then about 17% said the worst, a 1. Thanks for participating. We'll have a couple more questions in a minute. As a reminder, we're introducing a new format tonight. We were planning to do an open forum. At this point, we don't have any general questions, and we still have a lot of broadband questions. So we're going to continue to move along with questions because you all are asking some great ones. Let's go to Julie on the phone next. Go ahead, Julie.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Julie Crow. I actually know a few of the commissioners. I was the Executive Director for El Paso County Department of Human Services, but I live in Douglas County off of I-25 and Greenland Road. So similar to one of the prior callers, I'm interested in how can Douglas County help incentivize private providers to expand in areas like the one I live in. I literally live just 3 miles off of Greenland Road going east. And, if commissioners are interested in this area, it's not very highly populated. And if you look on the Nextdoor app, you'll see that there's always chat about what terrible internet service we have in our area, and examples of issues have been people haven't been able to provide good online schooling for their children or stable online schooling for their children during COVID. I, as Executive Director of DHS, experienced many, many times when I'd be in a conversation with commissioners, with our staff, with other counties, when suddenly my internet would just go out. And then it would take a few minutes to get back online, and it's just disruptive, and it felt kind of unprofessional, to be frank, to be in that position as Executive Director. When we speak to Kellen, Internet, or Extreme, what they say is because we have these big hills and there are these kind of beautiful buttes out here, that their towers just don't get over those very well. So we have anywhere between 0 and 11 I think it's MBS, if you look at fast.com. So really my question is, I know that we don't make up a big part of the voting population, and private providers don't see us as a priority. They say things like, well, if you get a critical mass, if you have more people, it will be worth it for us to put another tower there. But right now you just don't have enough people for it to be financially worth it for us to expand in your area. So how can commissioners help with that?
Well, I'll go ahead and we've heard some of that answer already, and Irina said a little bit ago, really your first step is to respond to our survey and make sure that we get you on the map, because and understand the challenges you guys are facing, because that's one of the solutions we're trying to find is based on what we've heard already about the amount of federal money that is intended to come into the county. What could we do to help close that gap? Because your provider talked about, hey, you just need more people. You just need more a better center of gravity. I'm familiar with your neighborhood, ma'am, and chances are you're not going to get much more gravity than you got right now. So the reality is, what could we do in identifying these areas that do have problems in our rural areas of the county, where, yeah, we could try to put together a program to help close that gap that you're finding when you talk to your providers. It's one of the things we've been talking about, and it's something that HR Green and Irina's crew are trying to help us understand and then draw a scope around so that we can invest your tax dollars wisely.
Yeah, and I would just add, that's a really good point, Commissioner Teal. When we think about how critical this service is, I mean, God forbid we have another global pandemic, but I think for so many people whose offices were closed, they were sent home, the only place that they could do business at was from their home. If you live in a rural community where you don't have access to high-speed internet, I think you're 100% right. It is unprofessional, and I think our rural residents really get gypped out of the opportunity to provide their services external to to their home. Hey, Roger, I want to make sure we do have some people here in the room I know that have driven out and taken the time to be with us. So I would love to open it up to folks here, and I don't want to put them on the spot, but we do have some phenomenal professionals from one of our favorite communities, Sterling Ranch, where there is remarkably high-speed internet. I don't know, Sterling Ranch, are you guys interested in sharing any information with us on your perspective?
And while Wendy's bringing you the mic, Julie, I would just like to tell you thank you for calling in. The minute you spoke, I heard your voice. I knew it was you. So thank you for everything you've done for El Paso, and welcome to Douglas County now as a full-time resident.
All right.
Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
So my name's Walker Hinshaw, and I work with a company called Lumiere Fiber, and we're partnered with Sterling Ranch, Colorado, who's many of you are probably familiar with by now. And we offer high-speed internet in that community, and we've found our programs to be extremely successful out there, and have actually started hearing from residents around that area who have really struggled to get the internet that they were hoping that they could get. And they're asking questions like, why can't you just bring internet out to us? We're right here. How come no one's serving us? And I think some of the things that have already gotten brought up in this meeting are very true, where if you're having to dig up the ground and you don't have a very dense environment, it can be difficult to make that pencil from a mathematical perspective and a return on investment perspective. But with some additional funding help, it could make it a lot easier to make those projects make sense and create that upfront funding to do the initial infrastructure investment in a fiber network that is going to be upgradable over time. That's going to allow people to continue increasing their speeds as the electronics on either end that are really powering the internet get better and better. And really, I was actually going to ask a question of how people and companies like Lumiere Fiber may be able to get involved in this process and offer themselves up as a potential partner to see how we could help and be a positive force for the community.
Well, I'm going to turn that to Arena to answer, but I will tell you, just in our travels throughout the county and even beyond, Sterling Ranch has sort of become the envy for high-speed internet. I hear these urban legends around, oh, well, you can turn on 20 movies in the same house and there's no load time. It seems like a fantasy where I live. I live in Lone Tree. We can't even do that. So, Arena, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so part of our next steps of the study is to talk to providers, including yours. So, we'd love to hear from you and to gain your perspective in the overall conclusions of the study to help the commission create better decision making. And in terms of partnerships, of course, it's in our interest to have you as a provider expand your service and also to be able to offset some of those, expansion costs and make, that expansion scalable and provide the service, the quality service that you give to that community to, your neighbors.
Awesome, thank you. We'd love to exchange some info.
Roger, I'm going to send it back to you, but I see a couple more folks in the room. Is there anybody here present with us that also had a question or a comment? Anybody else? Okay. Roger, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This might be a good time to have Irina come back in to the conversation with a few final comments. We're pulling up slide 3, Irina, so go ahead.
Thank you. So in this slide is really interesting. So our preliminary findings show that there's a couple of important things on this slide. So firstly, you can see how the community sees the county's role in this broadband expansion interest. So first, there's a fairly strong support for the county's involvement, as people largely see internet as an essential public infrastructure, and increasingly so as we all learn to rely on it for just daily work tasks, education tasks and being able to keep up with modern needs, modern demands. You know, what people actually use the internet for is growing daily. And in the next steps of the study, we'll be talking with stakeholder institutions, so providers, municipalities, economic development councils, HOAs, other anchor institutions, so that we can better assess their needs. And then that will help us take the next step of establishing a vision for the community and look at options to kind of facilitate availability. We have a note here that says, you know, we are not taking the direction that the county will be a provider. It's not at all in the plans. What the direction will be is definitely going to be consistent with the way that the county approaches other infrastructure projects. So, you know, please take the survey. It's an extremely valuable resource, important for federal grants. You know, it will help us with the next steps of the process. It's the first step of understanding the problem and then expanding that to potential options.
All right, thank you. This is probably a good time for us to ask our third polling question. Commissioner Teal, would you like to do the honors?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being definitely no and 5 being certainly yes, do you believe the county should play a central role in solving any broadband gaps in Douglas County?
All right, again, use the telephone keypad to enter the number of your response, or click if you're watching online. And while you're voting, we're going to go back to a question from Frank. Frank, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Frank. I'm a Douglas County resident. I don't know. I got here and whenever the Army sent me. Been here a lot of years. And DOD, Echelons Above God Communications, was my task. And my concern is safety. And I tell you, Irina is on the job. And a lot of other callers have brought up very valuable points. And just like FedEx or UPS or USPS shows up at your door to deliver it, it has to go the final mile. Infrastructure, I don't know. I view it from a global perspective. But when you micro it down, it's like this. It comes in fiber. It comes in copper, which includes cable and telephone, or it comes in wirelessly. I spent my life in transmission. I understand millimeter waves. I don't stand in front of my satellite antennas with however many 500,000 watts, doesn't matter, right? Millimeter waves penetrate. And it doesn't get around things, so you got to have a lot of antennas. And so the focus, obviously, I'm not disenfranchised. I'm in Highlands Ranch. I pay about $90. I got all I can eat. So I don't have a personal beef in this. County safety. If you get into the delivery of high-speed broadband over high-frequency radio, you can call it 5G if you want. So I operated at frequencies above that. You don't stand in front of the antennas. And so great challenge you guys have to deliver to the more disenfranchised, which is the rural piece. And chances are you're digging that final mile and you're digging in to establish that infrastructure network. But I caution, jump in. And I ask, what is the safety considerations when the plan includes high-frequency transmission for that final delivery and that and that 5G and putting antennas everywhere?
Who would like to address Frank's question?
You know, Frank, it's interesting you say don't stand in front of the satellite, because in World War II, people on Navy ships would exactly stand in front of the Navy radar in order to keep warm. And needless to say, none of those people are still living today. So this actually brings up a really good point about the long-term strategy that this study is aimed to promote. So as a previous caller mentioned, they only have a line of sight, point-to-point wireless technology available in their neighborhood, but that's not reliable. It's highly contingent on weather conditions, being able to go around obstacles, and because we live in this beautiful mountainous state, it presents its own topographical challenges. And so what we really want to do with broadband infrastructure is move it to the new sets of technology. So we want to go from unreliable line of sight, point-to-point wireless to fiber. We want to go from landline copper to fiber, satellite to fiber. So that is the long-term technology that we really want to focus on. There are, for cost considerations and because the technology is getting a lot better, some wireless solutions that could be the best option in some rural areas. So those are not off the table. The county doesn't have any ability to block RF considerations when it meets FCC standards, but they can do health studies, and all of those things are already being worked on in procedure to make sure that everything that you've addressed as potential safety considerations with wireless actually has a process to be resolved.
All right. Thank you very much. Here are the results of the third question we asked. We asked on that question, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being definitely no and 5 being certainly yes, do you believe the county should play a central role in solving any broadband gaps in Douglas County? 41% said certainly yes. 30% said likely yes, voted for. 15% voted 3 or neutral, and 7% each voted no or definitely no. Let's now go back to a question. Here's an online question from Byron. He asks, please address the lack of bandwidth and slow speed in the Glen Eagles Village neighborhood. Basically, we're isolated in obsolescence in an area bounded by the Lynx Golf Course, Hillcrest, and Glen Eagles Village Parkway. Only 2 IPSs.
I guess that's a good question for Irina. Irina, do you know, has that popped up on our survey results that you've had an opportunity to review yet, that location?
We have a map for the respondents that have answered the survey of the broadband speeds that are available. We would like to collect more information, especially from more of the rural areas that are struggling. So please, until the survey closes on Friday, November 12th, please take the survey. Please make put your data out there, and that is how we're going to log your existing capacity and be able to address any needs that you have in the future.
Yeah, folks, we're really counting on you guys who are listening today, anybody in the room, respond to that survey. Let us know what your situation is. Give us that kind of thank you, Frank, I was in the military too, but what we call in the Army, a target list to look at, to evaluate, and come up with a plan from there.
All right, let's go to Jay on the phone now. Jay, go ahead.
This is Jay. My question is not about access, but about competition. Thus far, most of the county doesn't have any competition in broadband. The only real player in this game is Comcast. CenturyLink is a non-competitive provider, and there isn't really anyone else. What will the county be doing to encourage competition? And will it be underwriting part of the cost of developing additional capacity for providers?
The study is at a stage where we're trying to understand the existing conditions in the county, and we're not at a point to make any recommendations or establish a path forward for a specific action. Although, we are coming closer to a point to evaluate and understand potential options that exist. And as we're progressing through this study, there will be more meetings and more decisions made, and that's a really good time to voice your input when we reach that decision-making stage.
All right, here is that address if you have not had a chance to respond to the survey and would like to go to the website and do so. It's at douglas.co.us/broadband-internet-access. I know the commissioners have mentioned it several times. They really want to hear from you and get your opinions on this important matter. We're going to ask one more survey question. It's a quick one, but we would appreciate you, everyone online, providing feedback on that. And here's the question. It is, we'd like to make sure you stay informed about the topics you care about here in Douglas County. If you would like to register the number you called in on and receive information from the county about future town halls, please press 1 on your phone now. And with that, we are going to go to one more question. I think that is from Steve. It says, the survey asked us to run a speed test. How will the results be impacted by the slower Wi-Fi reported speeds versus the subscribed for actual wire speeds?
It's our hope that, everyone who takes the survey is able to do that on the right connection, and we have kind of detailed instructions. But there is some risk that the speed test data is not going to be really measuring your landline data if you accidentally take it with your cellular connection or similar methods. Although, because we use one type of testing method, we're familiar with its advantages and disadvantages. So the speed test website that's run through UCLA, there are alternatives to it, and they do kind of measure the speed differently, but because we're measuring everyone's speed through the same medium, you're still going to be able to kind of compare apples to apples when it comes to measuring your service versus your neighbors. It has, technical algorithms that compensate for whether you're using Wi-Fi and whether you're pinging your nearest server, or whether, there's other latency issues involved down the system. So on a technical level, it is reliable enough for us to be able to trust the data reliably, and every single measuring method has its advantages and disadvantages. But this is the one we've chosen, and it's an industry standard.
All right, we're close to the end of our hour tonight. I'd like to thank our panelists from HR Green, Irina Stevens and Ed Green. I'll give you that web address one more time for the survey, douglas.co.us/broadband-internet-access. And as a reminder, the survey closes on Friday. If we didn't get your questions tonight or get to your questions tonight, we invite you to submit any question you may have about this or other topics to douglas.co.us/citizen-connect. You can do that anytime. And be sure to join us for future town halls. You can sign up at the county website. Now, before we conclude our live town hall, let's give each Douglas County Commissioner a few moments for final comments. We'll start with Commissioner Laden. Go right ahead.
Roger, thank you. I wanted to thank everyone, both online and in person. Thank you to Pete Smith, our friends at Sterling Ranch, and certainly Arena from HR Green. I think we had some really good discussion tonight. No doubt, many of the folks that don't have high-speed internet probably didn't have the capability to call in tonight or get connected. So we're certainly thinking about all of those that are out there on an island. I think we heard that comment loud and clear, that there are citizens in our county that just feel like they're isolated from that fourth utility. And I'm really interested to hear how we can help marshal these resources in partnership with others to ensure that high-speed internet is part of our future in Douglas County. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Teal, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Roger. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody who made the trip down here to Castle Rock and came in here to the Miller Building to attend in person. And thanks for everybody who did join online on your phones. Thanks for the great questions, the how-tos, the questions about how we can make better broadband connections, faster broadband connections here in the county. Obviously, you know, some of our answers betrayed the fact that, listen, this is a plan we're working on. We need that input. It's been said many times before, please go to that survey. Please fill out that survey. Give us that information that we need in order to invest your tax dollars properly.
All right. Thank you on behalf of Douglas County. We appreciate you sharing your time with us this evening, and we hope you'll join us again on a future town hall. Good night, and
Roger, may I say good night to everybody?
Oh, I'm
Commissioner
so sorry.
Thomas.
It just skipped right over you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to say, you know, I just heard tonight that Settlers Village is having problems with internet. They're just up the street from me, across from the post office at Lincoln in Quebec. So I think this whole process has been very educational tonight and for everybody. So please make sure you fill out that survey, and that's how we'll learn how we can help you by investing ARPA funds to make everybody's lives better. So thank you, everybody. Good night, and God bless.
Thanks again, and sorry again, Commissioner Thomas. Everyone, good night.